The CDC connects negative childhood experiences such as abuse or neglect with a myriad of long-term health impacts, including but not limited to alcoholism and alcohol abuse, smoking and drinking at an early age, and unfortunately suicide attempts. Joining us now to talk about this and just really dive a little bit more into what to look out for, Katie Albright, Executive Director of Safe and Sound, a child advocacy organization based in San Francisco. Katie, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Kenneth, thank you so much for inviting me today.
So, Katie, a separate report mentions that individuals who reported 6 or more adverse childhood experiences had an average life expectancy 2 decades shorter than those who reported none. What other critical issues can people who suffered abuse as children face?
Well, the risk of abuse and experiencing abuse impacts not just the child, and you've mentioned several indicators, whether or not it's long-term health indicators, mental and physical health indicators, also experiencing critical care in school, as well as loss of productivity. The impact to a child also is significant, and the impact to a family and the community at large is significant. These cases of child abuse are horrific, and our hearts collectively go out to the families that have to experience such tragedy. It really doesn't have to be this way. There's so much prevention and that we can think about, and early warning signs for families to prevent child abuse and child fatalities from happening in the first place.
So horrific, and it just really puts all the senses at work there. Makes you angry, it makes you sad, and you just mentioned there about what to look out for. We were watching that horrible story there in Houston. What red flags can people be on the lookout for to identify a victim of child abuse?
Well, oftentimes child abuse and fatalities are happening because significant stressors are impacting families. They're weighing upon families. Families don't wake up in the morning wanting to hurt their kids, but the stressors of life come crashing down upon them. And some of the most clear indicators are poverty, mental health, and depression. And so if we think about how do we support families from the start, how do we help families alleviate these stressors in their lives, often through prevention programs that can really think about how do we help families from the very start. I'm happy to go into that in more detail.
Yes, please do, because when you talk about helping families, there's so many resources out there at the state level and in the local level with municipalities. So what resources are available to victims of child abuse?
Well, there's incredible need for economic supports. You think about having your gas cut off or your housing not available or food insecurity. All of these indicators around poverty really contribute significantly to the stresses that are happening in families. And so we as a community need to think about how do we raise up economic supports? How do we think about earned income tax credits, increasing the minimum wage, increasing affordable housing? Research shows that a $1 increase in a minimum wage leads to a 10% decrease in the numbers of child abuse. Conversely, communities that are restricting economic supports to families, restricting housing and earned income tax credit and other kinds of economic supports are equally seeing an increase in child abuse. So when we think about what we can do to support families, we need to think about how to support these economic and concrete supports. There's incredible communities, there's incredible resources in communities where families can reach out to, whether or not it's home visiting programs or family resource centers. Family resource centers are places where families can come voluntarily to get support, whether or not it's counseling or childcare or economic supports, help finding job, help finding housing, whatever it takes. Family resource centers are called different things in different communities, family support centers, family centers of excellence, parenting centers, but they all work on one core component, which is how to build protective factors in families so that all families can thrive and all children can grow up in families and be their very best selves.
And Katie, I know with children in this pandemic, I'm sure things have been compounded by the pandemic with the fact that you've got kids who are, yes, a lot of them are in person right now, but there were a lot of kids, and maybe still kids, a lot of them who are still at home. So I'm curious about how this pandemic has impacted that and had an impact on child abuse.
Well, certainly there's been an increase of stress on families during this time, increase of isolation as families are sheltering from home, parents, caregivers concerned that their children are away from school, and so the loss of learning that's happened over this period of time. Economic loss, particularly around job loss and economic concerns that families are struggling with, and that puts an increased pressure and stress on families. And so that's why it's so incumbent upon all of us to think about how can we support families during this time. The data will come out shortly about whether or not we've actually seen an increase in the number of children that have been abused, but certainly we know that there has been an increase in stressors on families, an increase on domestic violence, and an increase on pressures that families are experiencing.
All right, the resources are out there, the red flags. We gave information, and we hope that people look out for those as well to help so many children out there. Katie, thank you again for joining us and putting this all in perspective.
Thank you so much for shining a light on this important issue.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.